Warning. The following episode discusses the year 2000 horror film What Lies Beneath and contains explicit sexual contents, including discussions of sexual violence. A complete list of content warnings can be found in the episode description. Please, proceed with caution. Hello and welcome to the Most Maligned Horror Podcast, a show offering critical analysis and contextualization of the horror films of the early 2000s. I am your host, Macaulay Elijah Quinn. I'm a filmmaker and film critic, and on today's episode I'll be discussing with you the July 2000 film What Lies Beneath. But before all that though, I want to just take a couple of minutes to talk about sort of where I've been, because I kind of dropped off the face of the earth for about a month there without explanation, which was a pretty shitty thing to do, but I'm back and I think that you all deserve some sort of explanation. Those of you who actually know me in real life will know that for a number of years now I have been struggling with my mental health, and that has been for a variety of reasons, but the sort of main contributing one, in my mind at least, is that I have been in jobs that I have absolutely hated, working with people who I just did not get along with. I hated my work. I would wake up in the morning and I would absolutely dread getting out of bed, because I would have to go in and see these people who just did not respect or value me, and that impacted a lot of different things in my life. It impacted all of my relationships. It made me very, very difficult to be around. Recently, though, I have had the opportunity to start over. So I have just started a new job about 4 weeks ago at the time of recording, and I have been working in film production, which is what I studied for. At the beginning of all of these episodes, I introduced myself as a filmmaker and film critic. All of the film work that I sort of was doing, it was all freelance, it was all contract work, and it was all sort of stuff that I was doing on the side. Now I am working with Lincoln University, which is a university here in the Canterbury region of New Zealand, and I am making content every day. I am being creative every day, and that has been really great for me. That's put me in a great spot mentally, but it did take some sort of adjusting to. I didn't quite know what my schedule was going to be like or anything like that. I didn't think that it would impact me quite as badly as it did. I didn't mean to just disappear without explanation. I had episodes queued up, ready to go, which I just was unable to sort of get around to editing and to recording and things like that. So my apologies for that, but now I am in, as I said, a lot better place, and I also now understand what my schedule is going to be like from now on. I am still going to be able to record this show. I am going to be continuing to release an episode every week. As well, I will be starting a new podcast, actually, which will be going live at the exact same time that this episode is. I am starting a new show called The Office of Interministry Affairs, which is a show where I read and talk about the crossover fanfiction Fallout Equestria. This is a My Little Pony Fallout crossover fanfiction published in 2011, which means a lot to me. It's a book that I return to again and again and again, and I have a lot of thoughts about it, and I did not want to subject my friends to my discussing it anymore, and so I thought I would instead put that out onto the internet for you all to hear. So hopefully you will all go and check that one out. Give the first couple of episodes a listen. Lastly, just before we begin actually sort of diving into the film, I just wanted to actually say thank you. Thank you so very much for listening. When I went through the interview process for this new job, I put on my resume that I was doing this show. And my employers found that really appealing. And none of that would exist without you, without an audience. So I just want to say thank you so very much for listening. If you are a Patreon subscriber as well, that is absolutely incredible. And I really do cherish the fact that so many people are willing to sort of listen to me and think that my opinion is worth hearing week after week. So thank you very much. Now then, What Lies Beneath, released in July of 2000. What Lies Beneath is a decent film. It is, to me, less interesting on its own and is instead sort of more interesting as a way of discussing a particular subgenre of genre cinema that I'm going to call dadcore or momcore cinema.
Check out your dad with the swag on the floor. Mama gon' brag when I walk in the door. Y'all ain't never seen a gorilla in the mist walk the line so fine with a blindfold.
This is a subgenre that we are going to see develop over the course of the next sort of couple of years, however long I'm doing this show. And so what I wanted to do with this episode is sort of plant a flag to say this is sort of what I think of this style of movie now, so that later on we can sort of go back and we can compare. Because I think that this type of film, this film is, I think the best way to describe it would be a thriller. This is not a horror film, necessarily. It contains sort of horror elements, but I think that you would put this film more in line with something like Silence of the Lambs than you would with, say, The Blair Witch Project. And this type of thriller, this type of genre cinema based in failing marriages is incredibly popular. I can think of a half dozen sort of different examples of this type of film. And I think that there is something really fascinating going on phenomenologically with this type of film, because they are always, like, relatively successful. What Lies Beneath was the 10th highest grossing film of the year 2000, and that was behind films like Mission Impossible 2, behind, was it X-Men 2 as well, was that year? The Grinch Who Stole Christmas? I think that was on the list too. I had a list prepared. I had notes for this episode that I had prepared weeks ago when I initially watched the film. I've now watched this film a couple of times because I thought, oh, I need to actually get around to posting another episode. I need to record something. And then I just wasn't able to. And so this was now, this is my like third set of notes, and unfortunately I've lost track of exactly sort of where that list was of the top 10 highest grossing films of 2000. Ultimately, it's not that important. My point is that What Lies Beneath and films like it are always pretty successful. They always do well at the box office. But I think that they're popular with a very specific demographic of people, which is people in sort of their middle age and above, who I don't think would call themselves genre fans. I don't think that the people who watch What Lies Beneath and enjoy it would consider themselves to be fans of a horror film. They would be fans of thrillers or fans of marital dramas. I don't want to dive too much into sort of how we define genres, because ultimately, for me, it's not something that I fully grasp, just to be honest with you. I don't have a complete sort of understanding of where the line between a thriller and a horror sort of is. To me, it's something that you feel. It is about the way that certain elements are presented. You know, for instance, this film, it contains supernatural elements. There is a haunting that is happening. This is a haunted house film. But I don't think that that is the way that people would talk about it. I don't think that people would necessarily present this as a haunted house film. I think that they would instead be talking about it as a marital drama, which I keep repeating, and I feel like I should maybe clarify. So What Lies Beneath is the story of a couple who, their daughter moves off to college, and alone in the house, the wife begins to sort of experience a haunting. She begins to see visions of what she initially believes to be her neighbor, who she suspects has been killed by her husband, in sort of an allusion to Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window. She believes that she has not necessarily witnessed a murder, but that she has she has reason to believe that her next door neighbor has been killed. But what the film reveals is that actually the person that she is being haunted by is the deceased lover of her husband. Her husband, a number of years ago, had an affair, and his wife discovered it. She got very, very drunk. She began sort of abusing alcohol as a result, and he basically put her into a position where he hoped that she would die because she had been embarrassing him in front of his colleagues and things like this. So that is what the film is about. It is about a marriage that is sort of falling apart, and it is about the wife coming to realize who her husband is, who he really is, beneath the facade that he presents to her and to, the world at large. And I think that this description, based on that, I think that you would be able to draw a few comparisons in your mind to similar types of films, similar films about wives learning the truth about their husband, learning the truth about the life that they live, and sort of where their sort of affluence has come from and things like that. The films that sort of spring to mind for me immediately are Sleeping with the Enemy, Unfaithful, The Boy Next Door, Swim Fan, from the year 2002, which I think we'll be covering on this show. I haven't quite gotten that far in sort of my planning, but...
What's up, ladies? Hey.
My swimming buddy.
Swim Fan is pretty excellent, and I think we should watch that. These types of films, the reason that I'm calling them dadcore or momcore or, parentcore is that I associate these types of films with my parents and with parents of my friends and family members. They always tend to be popular with that sort of demographic. I'm thinking people sort of, ages sort of 40 and above, I would say. They absolutely love themselves a good thriller. I think that if you asked people of sort of, that sort of age demographic about this film, I think that they would remember it. I think that they would have fond memories of it. I want to be clear that I'm not dismissing these films. I don't think that this is a bad film. I didn't personally vibe with it. It's just not my type of thing. It was enjoyable enough. It's well shot. It's well made. It's Robert Zemeckis, so he's a competent filmmaker. As well, it's a sort of Hitchcock. It's a Hitchcockian thriller. It's got a lot of allusions throughout to previous films of his. I've already mentioned Rear Window, but there's allusions in this to Shadow of a Doubt and to Vertigo. So it was a pleasant enough sort of experience watching it. But as I said, this film is more interesting to me for what it represents and what its success represents for genre cinema as a whole. Within the horror community, we often talk about the ways that horror cinema and genre cinema is sort of dismissed by the public. It's not recognized at a lot of awards shows and things like that. And whether or not that matters is a whole nother conversation. But genre cinema, there is a feeling that genre cinema is very easily dismissed. That is a sentiment that I have seen repeated again and again and again by all manner of critics and all manner of horror fans. And I think that it's interesting that the 10th highest grossing film of the year could be a haunted house film, and yet we wouldn't recognize it as a horror film. We would recognize it as a thriller. We would recognize it as a marital drama. We would recognize it as something else, something other than a horror film, because horror films are not legitimate. They're not, they're lacking some sort of artistic merit that a thriller, whatever that happens to be, however we define that, thrillers have something innate to them that makes them respectable in a way that a traditional horror film is not. And I think that's really fascinating. Now, all of this is just sort of my opinion. I couldn't find, I looked really hard, but I was not able to find anyone who had sort of done any sort of real academic study of what is going on with these films, with this type of marital drama, horror adjacent filmmaking. Why did these films resonate with audiences so much more than, say, I'm going to go back to the Blair Witch, because for whatever reason today, that's all that I can think about when I think of what is a horror film? The Blair Witch Project. What is it about watching these films that is more pleasurable for audiences than watching something like, say, Candyman? My opinion is simply that these films feel safer. They are, because they're working with a structure that people already recognize from sort of film history, it's a lot easier to sort of digest, it's a lot easier to follow, it's also a lot easier to sort of predict what's going to happen. From the moment that What Lies Beneath starts, you know what the ending is going to be. You know that the husband is, ultimately going to be revealed as a murderer, and you are going to find out this ghost is going to be, somebody that he has previously murdered, whether that's a lover or an ex-wife or something. Sort of what the broad strokes of this story are going to be. And so I think that makes it, as I said, a lot easier to watch, a lot easier to digest. It's comfy, it's cozy, you're not going outside of your comfort zone, you're not being pulled in any sort of direction, you're not made to think or engage in the same way that you would with a film that is more challenging. And oftentimes, horror films can be very, very challenging. Not necessarily their contents, not necessarily their thematic contents, I should say, but, viscerally, they can be very upsetting for a lot of people. And a thriller like this just isn't. That being said, that is just my opinion. That is just sort of what I feel about this sort of subgenre that I'm trying to define here with this episode. And so I'm curious to see sort of if my position on this changes as we go along. In a couple of years' time, this type of film isn't going anywhere. This type of film sticks around. They're still making them to this day, and they're still wildly popular. And so I'm curious, as I watch more of them, and I watch them more with sort of an analytical sort of eye, with an eye to sort of deconstructing them and sort of talking about the ways that they function, I wonder if my opinion will change, will develop. I'm curious about that. So yes, I suppose you could consider this to be sort of part one of an ongoing discussion that will continue for, God, however many years I'm going to end up doing this. Thank you all again for listening. I'd like to thank Janka Glonis for the use of her track Slime Dripping Down the Walls off of the album Fun Time Party Gal. A link to that album and to their Bandcamp can be found in the episode description. If you have any comments or queries regarding the show and you want to get in touch, you can do that on Twitter at Most Maligned or via email mostmaligned@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd ask that you please consider supporting the show on Patreon, patreon.com/mostmaligned, where for just $5 a month, you'll receive exclusive access to Take Two, a semi-weekly show offering critical analysis and contextualization of those films which have not made it onto the main feed. So if you head over there right now, you'll find an episode covering Tomie Replay, which was a very, very fascinating little film. It gives me an opportunity to talk about sort of my history, my experiences with queerness in my own life, and so I think that's a really, really good episode. I also make probably the funniest joke that I've ever made on it, so consider that. As well, if you could please take a moment to leave a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice, I would really appreciate it. Next week on the show, we'll be discussing July 2000's They Nest, a film which I know absolutely nothing about. Until then, this has been the Most Maligned Horror Podcast.